Well, another complaint about the Senate climate bill is now crossing party lines. Republicans and some Democrats maintain there are not enough incentives for the U.S. nuclear industry. Simply put, they say any legislation that involves capping carbon emissions has to boost the nuclear sector, a nearly emissions-free generation source. Well, today, Clean Sky's Tyler Suiters talked with Exelon's David Brown about what his company wants included in Kerry-Boxer beyond additional funding for DOE loan guarantees.
We think that there's a real near-term opportunity to get some additional low-hanging fruit from the existing fleet by uprating those power plants. You can get roughly 20% more power out of an existing plant by making some equipment modifications. A lot of those have been done very inexpensively and cheaply. We think there are another 8,000 megawatts or so that could come online in the next 5 or 6 years, but with capital costs so high, with natural gas prices so low, a lot of those aren't economic right now. So we think that if you treated nuclear uprates on a par with incremental hydro as part of the renewable standard, that you drive the financial incentives to get that additional generation online sooner rather than later.
Looking long term now, David, of course the storage issue is always out there, but what about the questions and potential for reprocessing and recycling of spent fuel here in the U.S.? Time and time again, lawmakers bring up the example of the Le Hague facility in France as an example of what can be done, the potential that can be reached, and that is recycling 96% of fuel that has been through the process just a single time.
Right, and it is an impressive story. I think if you look at the modeling that's been done of Kerry-Boxer and Waxman-Markey, EPA and EIA both estimate that we're going to need well over 100 new nuclear plants to meet our climate objectives. If we're going to do that, then we certainly need to think about closing the fuel cycle through recycling or reprocessing. I think the critical question that Congress is going to be looking at is, what's the time frame for doing that? Is that something where we're comfortable with the existing technology and deploying it today, or should we spend more time doing additional research and development to address some of the economic and non-proliferation issues that some associate with the existing technology? I think that from a political perspective, certainly there's broad bipartisan support for research and development. Deploying technology today, as enthusiastic as some members might be, is going to be a little tougher in terms of a political sell.
Even with positive legislation, nuclear titles that would theoretically advance the industry and work toward a fleet nearly doubling in size here in the U.S., isn't the industry still facing major financing hurdles? It seems like the environmental arguments have fallen by the wayside to some degree, and that financial issues, this cost of $8 to $10 billion per new reactor, have really become paramount.
Sure, and it's certainly a daunting task. I think that if you look at the views of Wall Street, of utility investors, of regulators, and even politicians, you see some reluctance to place a big bet on new nuclear right now because of the costs associated with it. At the same time, I think if we take a longer term view that nuclear is going to be cost competitive with clean coal technologies, certainly with renewables over the longer term, but we do have to get this first set of plants right.
And Brown also tells Clean Skies News the most relevant amendments to Kerry-Boxer involving nuclear energy could come during the floor debate rather than at this week's committee markup.